What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into the WVU postgame show here at the Voice of College Football, hosted by a couple hosts here of the Country Roads webcast channel, channel that you probably know if you follow Mountaineer Sports. I'm your host, Jordan Cruz, joined by one of our other CWW hosts here at the Country Roads webcast, Steven. What's going on, Steven?
How you doing today, my guy?
Seen better days, I guess, as far as Mountaineer fandom is concerned. Mountaineers fall here as I throw the final score up on the screen for you guys. 48-31, Kansas State comes out on top of WVU in this one here in the 11th game of the 2022 WVU football season. Penultimate game of the season, final home game, last game in Morgantown. Mountaineers ultimately fall by 17 to unfortunately drop to 4-7 overall and 2-6 in conference play here on the 2022 season. Stephen, we'll get into the finer details as we continue throughout, I guess. And of course, anything that you guys want to add in, we'll kind of let you guide the conversation, whether you be tuned in on the Voice of College Football channel, the West Virginia channel at the Voice of College Football, or our channel here at the Country Roads webcast. Any one of those you're tuned into, be sure and drop your thoughts, questions, concerns in the comments. We'll address those as we continue throughout here on the post-game show here at the Voice of College Football Network, and we appreciate of you guys. Throw a like in there. That'll really help this video's performance and help future videos performances as well. And hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Helps us, helps you, helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation, trying to get this West Virginia channel up to 1,000 subscribers, and we're so close that we could use your help to get there. But having said that, Stephen, just kind of opening thoughts. Where are you standing in regards to how you felt about the Mountaineers in this game and their performance? Was it kind of along the lines of what you thought it would be, or was it less than you thought it'd be? Better? What were kind of your thoughts heading into the game versus how it ended out for the Mountaineers, and your just kind of thoughts going forward here as the Mountaineer football program is, at a bit of a crossroads, I guess you could say. Athletic director change, and then, another losing season, their third in 4 years. They had secured a bowl game in 17 of the last 19 seasons prior to 2019 when Neil Brown took over, and now for the second time in his 4 seasons, they will not reach a bowl game. Had 2 losing seasons in that time, and now they will secure a third losing season in those 4 years. So just kind of prefacing that. But what are your thoughts, Stephen, following this game and as far as, it's concerned and the future of West Virginia football?
But everything, I think that West showed the best offense that they've played in probably the better part of the last 2 or 3 or 4 seasons at that. So I really liked what I seen out of the offense early. I thought early that West Virginia was going to be able to give Kansas State a better football game late than what they did, because it looked like we had a little bit
On,
of
Blue Hawk?
fire under our defense for a little bit with the interception, with the pick six by Malachi Ruffin. But then that quickly changed into the defense that we've seen all season long throughout the better part of the rest of the game. You've seen a lot of good things. For example, you've seen the Garrett Green to Sam James connection a lot today. I think it was 3, maybe even 4 times for a touchdown, for long, big plays. And then you've seen things like getting a false start procedure three times in a row. And I can't fathom how something like that happens in Division I football. But a little feature there. But yeah, I've seen a little bit of everything. Not anything that I would like to progress on in the future. I can say that. I think that West Virginia football needs a change of direction. With that said, like me and you said off air earlier, I think that with that being said, I think West Virginia needs to keep Neil for at least the last game to, for lack of a better word, boost morale, I guess, so that you don't have kids jumping ship even more so than you're already going to have. I'm going to reference Mumu Ben Wahad, with his mother tweeting out and saying the things that she said already, because we're without an athletic director now, which it might be something different, but that's what I can read from the comments that we've heard. But a lot of bad, little good, and I really don't know where West Virginia football is headed in the future, to be honest with you, because uh, I would honestly argue that that might have been one of the most competitive games in the first half that West Virginia's played all year long, and still you come out like that flat in the second half, and you have a 10-yard. I think it was somewhere in the realm of 10-minute drive, and you come up empty with no points, and that just cannot happen.
Yep. I'd 100% agree with you right there. And I seen, a few people mention it, and I would 100% agree with that sentiment. And I wanted to, mention here as well that that's almost just seems to me like Neil Brown, the Neil Brown era right there culminated in one drive, the Neil Brown era in a nutshell, if you will, an 8 to 10 minute drive and coming away with no points, definitely. I'd agree with you 100% there. Jay Glizzy, 1999 here says Charles Woods is leaving. Yeah, that's another thing I wanted to mention. You mentioned Mubu bin Wahad, and of course Corbin Page as well had been a couple of transfers that happened recently for West Virginia. But how about kind of the breaking news just ahead of the start of this game coming out that Charles Woods has decided to enter the transfer portal. I know if you tuned into our show here on the Country Roads webcast, our Kansas State preview show, when we ran down the seniors, we talked about Charles Woods seeming like he was going to utilize his redshirt season, and we had hoped that that meant that he would return to WVU, but apparently he's utilizing that redshirt season and going to enter the transfer portal. May already have a school that he's committed to or in mind, whatever you want to preface that how by saying, but in his announcement he said commitment coming soon, so I guess he kind of already has that lined up. But Steve, I don't know if you saw this prior to the game, but what are kind of your thoughts on Charles Woods leaving, moving forward for West Virginia? I know that there's probably going to be more transfers. We're going to try and keep a running total of that here on the channel. I'm going to put up a video about Charles Woods leaving here on our Country Roads webcast channel, and that'll be up here on the West Virginia channel at the Voice of College Football, which we do encourage you guys. Please subscribe to the West Virginia channel here at the Voice of College Football Network. We're trying to get that up to 1K subscribers. But, Stephen, what are your thoughts on Charles Woods' departure and, what it means moving forward? I know that he was a key cog, not only that they hope to be in the Mountaineer defense this season, but maybe even moving forward. And him moving on, is that a sign of things to come? Just kind of the tip of the iceberg as far as it comes to transfers when we're talking about what may occur within this program, coaching staff wise and otherwise? Or do you think that whoever comes in is going to do a better job of maybe keeping some of these players around? But what are your thoughts on Charles Woods' departure?
I think that it's a microcosm of what has been the entirety of Neil Brown's recruiting ability in his entire WVU. I was one of the ones that has been arguing this entire time that he's getting the best recruiting classes that we've ever seen in school history, and that might be true, but that means nothing if you can't keep them here. So that will be my argument on that. I think that West Virginia, undoubtedly has had some of the best recruiting classes in school history for the past couple of seasons. But I want to go back and more accurately look at it, because this may be an ignorant statement, but I'd be willing to bet that under 50% of those, or over 50% of those guys with 4 or 5 stars, or whatever, 3 or whatever you want to go by, about 50% of those are probably transferred out of West Virginia's program by now, and we've replaced them with other transfers from the portal. So as much as I hate it, that's become the way of college athletics in a whole. The transfer portal is the new recruiting class, if you will. I think that's going to be the new, more than we pay attention to high school recruiting classes. I think that we're going to start paying just as much, if not more, attention to transfer portal recruiting classes. And I don't know if Neil Brown is able to adjust to that, but to this point, he has shown that he is not able to do that. I get what they were trying to do last year in the transfer portal and go after guys in winning programs and programs that have been proven to win, big time games, but those games aren't high level football per se, not the level that we're trying to play. So one or two guys that are diamonds in the rough, I get that, but entire secondary and entire defensive unit that is basically built upon transfers from the Division II football level, that wasn't the right approach to it. And I think that a lot of people would agree with me on that.
100%. I'd agree with you as well. And I think to me, it's not even a matter of who they're bringing in, but it's a matter of the talent evaluation of this coaching staff. I think remains in question. I think you can look across the board, even going back, Jarrett Doege last season versus Garrett Green, with what we've seen from Garrett Green in recent games. You can look at it through that aspect. You can look at it through some younger guys that maybe should have been playing over experienced players, and this coaching staff's over reliance, perhaps you could say, on playing experience over young talent. And so I think that sticks out to me, especially when you look back, this offseason, what were they saying to us, Stephen? They kept saying, this is the best defense we've had here at WVU. This is the fastest defense we've had at WVU. They're going to be able to play man coverage. So to me, that means that they, maybe push some guys out that maybe they shouldn't have pushed out. Who knows? We can talk about that one way or the other. But I think more so in regards to that is the guys that they brought in when we're talking about Wesley McCormick, Rashad Ajayi, and the like, that they really overvalued those guys. They saw themselves hit on Charles Woods and thought they could do the same thing again with Ajayi and McCormick. And I think it goes back to, this entire staff's, talent evaluation or lack thereof, and how that stands out with what they've done during their time at WVU. And that, look no further than that this offseason. Last offseason, we were told, prior to 2021, what were we told? Jarrett Doege's the most improved player on the team. And we saw how much Jarrett Doege struggled last season. This offseason, we were told
NFL level
this is
passes.
the most athletic defense. Yes, absolutely. We were told things like that. This offseason, we were told this is the most athletic defense we've had, the fastest defense we've had. We can play man coverage with these defensive backs that we've brought in. And guess what's struggled? Been West Virginia's biggest struggle. It's been the secondary. They've been slow on a defense that they said was going to be the fastest defense they've had. They've been unathletic on what we've heard was the most athletic defense that they've had. They've been unable to play man. That's when they've struggled most, on the defense that they said that they would be able to play the most man coverage. So, I mean, just on and on again, it's a talent evaluation of this staff to me that really stands out as being misjudged. Blue Hawk 71, if we jump into the comments here, says, if they fire Neil Brown, we will be in trouble for the next 5 years, and all the team will be in the portal. It's definitely a possibility. That's a concern, but you can't let fear dictate your decisions. That's something I heard Golden Blue Dude talk about on this channel last night in the preview to the Kansas State game, and that's something that I would 100% agree with. Fear can't dictate your decisions. You never know what's going to happen moving forward. Look, when Neil Brown came in, he was actually able to secure the recruiting class that was coming in. You got to hope whoever West Virginia brings in, if they do decide to move on from Neil Brown, is able to do the same. And regardless, if Neil Brown stays, I think you may lose some players to the transfer portal as well, because West Virginia choosing to keep Neil Brown. From what I've been hearing behind the scenes, Neil Brown has been, questionably liked by some of the players and some of the transfers that have transferred out. If you talk to them, family members, etc., one of the reasons that's been, stated is Neil Brown has kind of seemed like a used car salesman. Maybe he's lied to some of these recruits, lied to some of these players. But Stephen, what are your thoughts there on Blue Hawk 71's comments on moving on from Neil Brown or not?
Just to be a broken record to myself earlier, I like I said before, I think that if you're going to recruit those players, you need to keep them here. Like I said before, half of them end up in the portal anyway. So like you said, the used car salesman approach, to where you kind of lie to these guys to get them to come to campus. And then once they get there within a year or two, they realize that they're not getting, what was promised to them. And no, I'm not saying that you should promise every kid a starting role to get them on campus, and then, that's not the right approach at all. I think that you should, be very truthful with these kids in the role that they're going to play at the university. And I think that was in the past, even if that didn't mean, necessarily the most high level recruits in the country. Those recruits have eventually turned out to be good players. And I think that even in the age of the transfer portal, I think West Virginia can still find itself with that type of team. I'm going to reference Garrett Green right there. This is a kid that could have transferred out easily, not even just last year, but a year before that, and could be starting somewhere right now, making a really, really good name from himself at another program, but he chose to stay at West Virginia. And I know that kind of, combats what I'm saying about other players transferring out. But if we don't if we don't get a guy in here that can, you know, produce whenever he has the players, then it's just going to continue to go downhill from here. And we're just going to continue to get, even if we do get those recruits, they're going to transfer out within a 1 year to 2 year time frame, or we're stuck with, um, you know, second level transfer portal recruits, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's kind of the situation right now, and kind of what you're, I guess, worrying about here at West Virginia. But Blue Hawk 71, do always appreciate you, chiming in, commenting here on the videos and everything. And you're always a loyal Mountaineer, and we know that for many years you've been a loyal Mountaineer, and we appreciate your thoughts always, as you're one that always chimes in and everything, and we appreciate that. And I don't disagree with you. If Neil Brown gets fired, the transfer portal is certainly a concern, but I think it's a concern either way you spin it. If Neil Brown is fired or if he stays, I think you could be looking at first one way or the other. Jay Glizzy, 1999, same goes for you, always tuning in and chiming in. We're always appreciative of that here at the Country Roads webcast, and, as Mountaineer Nation here, as we host the WVU post-game show here at the Voice of College Football channel. And encourage you guys one more time, like the video, of course, and subscribe to the West Virginia channel here at the Voice of College Football Network, trying to get that up over 1,000 subscribers. And we're also close and can use your help for us to reach that goal. And we know if you're a Mountaineer fan, you know other Mountaineer fans, so share this around with them and tell them to subscribe as well. And we can reach that goal in no time. But Jake Glizzy, 1999, says this means Brown will be fired at the end of the year. Personally, I'd agree with you 100%, Jake Glizzy. I think, my prediction after Shane Lyons was fired, that it pretty much sealed Neil Brown's fate, save for maybe them bringing in like a Kelly Zinn as athletic director. That's the one thing to me that can maybe save Neil Brown. Because, if Kelly Zinn comes in, her and Neil Brown have a good relationship. It's even been rumored by some friends of, the West Virginia channel here, that Kelly Zinn was actually the one that, secured that contract for Neil Brown, and that extension that he got that, kind of ultimately was the nail in Lane and Shane Lyons' coffin, rather. So, say for maybe Kelly Zinn being hired as West Virginia's athletic director, personally, I've gone on record and said I don't see how any other athletic director coming in that's doing an evaluation of the West Virginia football program could say, oh, hey, Neil Brown's done good. Let's keep him for, another year. So, to me, I just think that's, definitely Neil Brown. Probably you're going to see him coach one more game at West Virginia, and you probably just saw him coach his last game in Mountaineer Field, Stephen. But what about you? Any other thoughts as far as that's concerned about Neil Brown's status at the end of the year? I know I haven't talked to you too much extensively since Shane Lyons been hired. Would you agree with me that, that kind of was the nail in Neil Brown's coffin as well, say for maybe Kelly Zinn coming in, that Neil Brown will be gone and we'll see a new coach on the Mountaineer sidelines in 2023?
I would 100% agree with you. I think that it would be hard to argue that. I think that Shane Lyons was more or less the lifeblood of Neil Brown. The only lifeblood left for him at WVU, unless he were to win the desired amount of games this year, which he did not do. And I think that was a lot of what went into, obviously, what made the decision for the administration at WVU. I'm honestly surprised. I haven't been able to talk about it like you said. So I'm going to kind of, talk about Shane Lyons a little bit, but I'm kind of surprised that they let him go this early, because I think me and you had already discussed that.
Go ahead. Give me your
had been
thoughts on
rumored
that, because I actually got somebody knocking at my door real quick. I'm going to go check that. So go ahead. Give me your thoughts on Shane Lyons' departure, the future of WVU. What do you think WVU may go with AD regardless? I'm going to go check this out right quick. I hear my dog barking out there.
Yeah, I got you. Honestly, really surprised that West Virginia let him go so early. I thought that I would give him a few more years. I think more than anything, I was surprised because it wasn't just Neil Brown that he brought in. You know what I mean? He's brought in several other coaches around the athletic department that have been very successful. Talking about the women's basketball team, talking about the baseball team, talking about the men's soccer team and the women's soccer team. Some of those programs weren't so notable prior to Shane Lyons taking the helm as athletic director at WVU. So kind of premature a little bit, I would, in my opinion. But with that said, I'm not terribly mad at the decision. I think that going in a new direction, especially for someone like Gordon Gee, who has seen success at a very, very high level and been in a place where it has been success, associated with the athletic departments, but he has had very, very big roles in hiring successful coaches at the places that he's been. And no, I'm not saying that West Virginia's going to get Urban Meyer as their football coach, but I am going to give credit where credit's due. And Gordon Gee played a pivotal part when he was at Ohio State in 2015 and bringing him up there. So I think that if we would have trusted Gordon Gee's decision to go with Luke Fickell back whenever he was, the decision was trying to be made between Fickell and Neil Brown, I think we'd be sitting here talking about a whole different situation. You can look at Cincinnati's football program and tell me otherwise if you think that something different would have happened. But my first choice, I think, and like you said, I think she would be a very amazing choice, obviously, coming from LSU in a program like that. Another good choice, obviously, would be my top pick would be Rob Mullins out of Oregon. West Virginia graduate, has done great things out at the University of Oregon, has loved West Virginia's program and had nothing but great things to say about it every time that he has had the opportunity to have interviews with Tony Caridi and I think that I've seen him actually. I think he actually came out to a presentation for one of the statues. I could be wrong, but I know King Kendrick and a bunch of other West Virginia graduates that have donor roles and stuff were there, along with some just high level guys that had stakes in the school. Or I think I remember him speak at one of those events. But anyway, before I digress too much, I think that he would be my top pick. I do not have a long list, unfortunately, of athletic directors that I know from around the country. I'm just naming ones that obviously I've heard the most about and that I like the most out of what I've heard. But I don't know. I think I've said it several times this year, but I think this year is a very pivotal year for West Virginia football and athletics as a whole, in terms of the way that it's going to go from here on out for the next, however many umpteen years. You've seen what the era of football was like from around probably say the 80s to the early 2000s. That was because of the pivot change right there in terms of TV deals and things like that. They started to work more. And then obviously the early 2000s to now, TV has changed the game, kind of sports as a whole entirely, in the way that they schedule games and what days the games are played. What it even goes down to what kids go to what schools because they play on TV more. So this right now, I think is going to be very pivotal. So whoever they do hire, and I know that I sound like a broken record again, but whoever they do hire is got to be the guy, because I don't know how long they're going to be here. It seems like an athletic director revolving door in the past 2 decades or so at WVU. Hopefully it's the right person, whoever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree 100%. Not only do they need to nail the athletic director hire, but of course the athletic director that they bring in needs to nail the head coaching hire, if that is the direction that they choose to go in to move on from Neil Brown, which will remain to be seen here with one game left on the 2022 season. But of course, I digress. I did miss, a little bit there coming out. But who did you say was your favorite there coming in as the West Virginia athletic director that you would like to see the Mountaineers hire?
I said Rob Mullins out of Oregon.
Oh, I was hoping. I figured that's who you were saying, because that's also my favorite candidate right here. But I did want to take the chance right here to share this. I'm gonna share my screen with you guys here on the post game show. I did this, the other day in a show that I did. But I feel like one of these 7 names right here will be the next athletic director for West Virginia at this time. And, as I said in that video, I'll preface this again, always subject to change, the situation in flux right now. But my favorite out of this list is Rob Mullins, who Steven mentioned is definitely probably my number one. But then other than that, I do like Matt Borman and Patrick Chun. This list in no order necessarily, but Patrick Chun over there at Washington State has been brought up as a name recently. He's done a really good job fundraising wise, has ties to Gordon Gee. He also was at Florida Atlantic and broke records there. Matt Borman is at LSU, and he's been endorsed by Pat White on Twitter. Rob Mullins, who Steven mentioned and I've mentioned, is my favorite as well. The aforementioned Kelly Zinn at LSU. Whit Babcock, who is currently at Virginia Tech as the athletic director. I'm not too big of a fan on that, but he is a West Virginia native. And then you've got Kevin Miller at Georgia, who has ties to the West Virginia program, and then Alex Hammond, who we saw at West Virginia in the past decade with Dana Holgorsen, also has ties to the program, currently running Athletes First over there, doing a good job of that. And he's also a guy that's been noted as being very good at fundraising. So personally, I feel like one of those 7 names will be the next West Virginia athletic director. So I wanted to take a second and touch on that while we were talking athletic director wise. But G Smyrna 746 coming in the comments here. Really appreciate you tuning in and chiming in. You're always a loyal supporter of the Mountaineers, and we're really appreciative of you. He says Fickle turned down the job. Yes, Luke Fickle actually, was a favorite candidate. It came down to him and Neil Brown back in 2019, where the Mountaineers were searching for a new head coach. Luke Fickle, of course, ties to Gordon Gee from Ohio State when he, served as the interim coach there and was the defensive coordinator there as well. And Luke Fickle did indeed turn down the job at West Virginia. The rumor I've heard is due to the fact that there is no Catholic schools, in close proximity to Morgantown. I think there's one in Clarksburg, maybe even Fairmont, if I'm not mistaken. But Luke Fickle is Catholic, and the lack of Catholic schools there played a part in him turning down the job, from what I remember. G Smyrna 746 says, "Where's Caden Prather? Is he hurt?" Yes, I don't know if you picked up on this, Stephen, as well, but Caden Prather did not dress in this game for West Virginia. Going into the game, I had not heard anything about an injury, but I knew that he was not dressing, and I updated that on our Twitter, which you can find that at WVU Country Roads there on Twitter. We're always chiming in with some pregame thoughts and a live thread there during Twitter, so it's a great place to follow on Mountaineer football game day. But indeed, Caden Prather, it turns out, is injured actually. Credit to Coos there, who is at Coos206 on Twitter. And of course, I'm sure a lot of you guys know here on YouTube from Coos' Corner, and of course, he's prevalent here on the West Virginia channel here at the Voice of College Football Network, which, one more time, subscribe to that if you guys haven't already. But yes, he was able to confirm it and send to us and let us know that indeed Caden Prather has suffered an injury, didn't practice all week, and that's the reason that he wasn't dressed in this game. Stephen, I don't know if you picked up on that or not.
I did. I only picked up on the very, very last part of it. My bad. My audio went out. I was trying to get that situated, but seems I don't know what happened, but I've got it back now.
No worries. I figured that was the case, but yeah, I was just talking about Caden Prather. I talked about him not being dressed, and then Coos was able to confirm during the game and send to us on our Twitter over at WVU Country Roads on our Country Roads webcast Twitter that Caden Prather is indeed hurt. Didn't practice all week, and that's the reason he didn't dress. I know some people were worried with Charles Wood's announcement of his transfer that maybe Caden Prather wasn't, dressed for a similar reason, but actually he is hurt. Definitely not positive news, but he was able to confirm that he is injured, and that's the reason that he didn't dress.
Okay, well, I guess that's not good news, but not bad news either. In terms of that, luckily.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with you. That's the way I would kind of preface it as well myself. It's definitely not good news. You never want to hear of an injury, but in comparison to the transfer news, who knows how you can compare those two. But Drew Ferguson says that he has a suggestion, maybe Bill O'Brien as the athletic director for West Virginia. The problem with that idea is he's never been an athletic director anywhere else. Yeah, I don't know about athletic director at West Virginia, but he's certainly on the list for me as far as coaching candidates is concerned. But I'm sure he's popping up on a lot of people's list as far as head coaching candidates is concerned. The one thing that I'm hoping West Virginia goes after, coaching candidates wise, is Power Five experience. Head coaching Power Five experience, rather, I guess I should say, as West Virginia's never really hired a coach in the past with head coaching experience at the Power Five level. And Bill O'Brien, of course, has that. We saw the success he had at Penn State. So, to me, some of the top names are ones that do have experience there coaching at the P5 level, coaching wise. But I hadn't thought about Bill O'Brien, athletic director wise. Stephen, what are your thoughts there, as far as Drew Ferguson's comments as maybe bringing in Bill O'Brien for an athletic director? But if you're not feeling that, what about a coach?
I really honestly don't know too much about Bill O'Brien overall to make an intelligent decision on that. To be honest with you, I would guess with his NFL experience that he would be, that would bring something very positive to the table for a program like WVU. But to be completely honest, I just don't know enough about Bill O'Brien to know if I like him or dislike him in either of those roles. To be honest with you.
Yeah, that's one thing. Research is required when it comes to talking athletic director candidates or coaching candidates for that matter for sure. We got Eric Cruz in here. My dad, shout out to my dad in here chopping hump comments and always a loyal supporter of the Country Roads webcast here as we host the W post game show on the Voice of College Football Network. And one more time, as we're about halfway through here on this post game show for West Virginia football, I wanted to remind you guys, if you haven't already, hit that like button. That'll really help this video's performance and help future videos performances here on the channel. And subscribe. We're trying to grow this West Virginia channel here at the Voice of College Football Network to 1,000 subscribers. And subscribing helps us and helps you and helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. But he says, good job as always, fellows. Really appreciate that. He says he thought Cortez Braham and Sam James really stepped up. Yeah, I know Cortez Braham had over 50 yards receiving, and Sam James, as you well know, Stephen, being along with me along this ride of the Country Roads webcast, and of course, those that follow the Country Roads webcast knows Sam James been a favorite of mine, and I've got to shout out his performance in this game. I know he walked on senior day. He's liable to come back for one more season. Who knows what's going to happen with that, but how about him in his final performance at Mountaineer Field, possibly coming out 3 catches, 102 yards, 3 touchdowns?
Hey man, you gotta love it for a guy like Sam James. I love it for a guy like you, who's been such a big guy, a big fan of a guy like Sam James. But my favorite thing about it was somebody had posted the picture of him sitting on the sideline. Said 3 reception, 102 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And they had posted the Randy Moss one right beside of it when he had 100, I think it was 162 yards and 3 touchdowns on 3 receptions when he was playing for the Vikings. So I thought that was pretty funny.
I saw that too. I thought the same thing. I think I actually liked it on our Twitter. That was pretty awesome. And I saved the picture, of course, of Sam James with the 3 catches, 102 yards, 3 touchdowns when they flashed that up on the screen. Had to save that on my phone.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And as bad as this season's been, we've had some pretty cool moments at times.
Yeah. And that's the one thing I will say about this game, despite the fact, West Virginia has unfortunately secured their, 3rd losing season in the last 4 years. The first quarter and maybe even the first half, if you will, definitely the first quarter and, half of that second quarter was, some of the most entertaining moments we've had as, Mountaineer Nation here, in recent WVU football history. I think that was a really entertaining first quarter, and I really love the performance. And, Sam James was a big part of that, so shout out to him. But Drew Ferguson coming in on the comments here says, the weird thing about you guys hiring Neil Brown and keeping Dana Holgerson, then he went to Houston and made Houston really good. And they think that was a big mistake for West Virginia. I would say verdict's still out on that one. Houston, I think, was, meant to be a lot more successful than they were this season. I won't disagree with you. I don't know if Neil, in hindsight, is any better than Dana Holgerson. At the time, I thought Neil Brown was going to be a much better coach, as did probably a lot of the nation. But, in hindsight, I don't know, maybe they're more equal than we thought. But what are your thoughts there on Drew Ferguson's comments, Stephen?
I agree with you. I think the verdict's still out on that one. I would not say that he has made them a quote unquote really good school, a really good team, because I think that if anything, they've been more of a disappointment since he's got there. I think that you keep hearing rumors about how Houston might, or Dana Holgerson might not even make it to Morgantown in terms of playing, WVU if he doesn't,
Oh,
do
I
a better
sure hope
job
he
of
does,
coaching.
though.
So me as well, me as well. So yeah, I guess it's all a matter of opinion, but I think that I would overall disagree with that comment in terms of making them, about Dana Holgerson anyway. I would
Yeah,
agree with the
I
part
think so
that
too.
there
I
might have
think,
been a mistake for West Virginia to hire Neil Brown. I will agree with that, however.
yep. Yeah, well, but the thing is, it's a mistake in hindsight, right? Like, who
Right.
at the time, whether it be national media, me, you, probably anyone in this, live stream or otherwise, thought that hiring Neil Brown was a bad decision. I would say, I would argue to say no one thought that hiring Neil
Yeah, no
Brown
one.
was a bad decision. Yeah, exactly. So he was, one of the most popular coaches in college football at the time. But in hindsight, he's maybe not much of an upgrade from what Dana Holgerson was doing at WVU. Definitely. I mean, look right now, West Virginia is, one game away from their worst season and their worst 4 year stretch since the late 70s and their worst season since, 2013, almost a decade ago. So it's hard to argue, in hindsight, that argument. But I don't know, moving forward, West Virginia's just going to have to, make a great athletic director hire and hope to make a good head coaching hire. And we'll see what happens moving on. But in regards to moving
Yeah.
on, John Stern here in the comments says WVU might as well cancel the last game. They aren't beating Oklahoma State. Tend to agree with you, John, just because that game's on the road and West Virginia's been a much better team at home than on the road this season. But I don't know 100%. You never know what can happen. But yeah, I'm definitely not going to argue with you there. What about you, Stephen?
Yeah, I don't know if they should cancel it, but yeah, I'm not giving West Virginia any kind of a chance in that game. If they played against Kansas State the way that they did today, then I'm not really too hopeful for all those paddles to be banging on the walls out there out in Stillwater.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not going to be any fun without a bowl game left to fight for. Who knows what type of effort is going to show up on the Mountaineer side? But all we can do is have our fingers crossed and hope and pray that the Mountaineers come out with their best effort forward and maybe get one more win on the 2022 season. That's all we can hope for, and we're going to be there no matter what, cheering through all four quarters and watching every second of that game, as me and you always do, as the big Mountaineer fans that we are. G Smyrna six says, "What about transfer portal news?" Well, we touched on it a little bit, earlier briefly, but as far as West Virginia is concerned, I'm going to try and post some update videos on that over on the Country Roads webcast as it moves forward, and try and do a better job of tracking the roster as a whole this offseason. But what I can tell you thus far, defensive back Mumu Ben Wahad, true freshman from West Virginia, has transferred out. Tight end Corbin Page, another true freshman, has transferred out. Charles Woods from West Virginia has transferred out. But along with that, West Virginia, of course, will get some transfers in as the offseason progresses. And we will, of course, see some more transfers out, though, especially depending on what happens with the coaching situation. But, Stephen, anything to add there as far as transfer portal news is concerned?
Yes, just to kind of you know extend on to that, I think that West Virginia is definitely in a dire spot, if you will, when it comes to the transfer portal, because just like I said earlier, this transfer portal is more and more and more prevalent. I think that without a doubt, this is going to be the most watched recruiting class in terms, like I said, to compare it to the high school recruiting classes. Um, Neil Brown's proved that he can't evaluate talent, like you said earlier. I think that this new guy that comes in um, needs to, and hopefully does, evaluate talent on a very fast scale, because they're going to have to come in and recruit to get transfers in that portal. So I don't know. I don't know what date they're planning on doing that. I don't even know if that's. This is all hypothetical, of course, but if that's what's going to happen, then I think the West Virginia is going to have to, be quick in terms of their coaching search, which is going to be a difficult ball game when you're thinking about hiring an athletic director and then hiring a coach. You don't really even have time to solidify really a good relationship unless you have one that's already built. So I think that's to be noted.
Yeah, yeah. That's one thing that I would 100% agree with you on, and something that I've mentioned myself as well, is that West Virginia, since the announcement of moving on from Shane Lyons, they have said that within 3 to 4 weeks they hope to have an athletic director in place. I think that's an interesting date, rather, excuse me, as you look ahead. That's almost coincides with the end of the college football season. National Signing Day, I believe, is on December 21st, if I'm not mistaken. So if West Virginia wants to move on from their coach and have another one in place, ideally they would like to have the coach in place by that date, but you at least got to have the athletic director in place by that date. So I think that 3 to 4 week timeline is interesting, because if they're able to hit that and meet that, then that would be, early December, they bring in a new athletic director, and that would give that athletic director 1 to 2 weeks to potentially maybe bring in a new coach that can hopefully keep this signing class together, recruiting class together, rather, for West Virginia, much like Neil Brown was able to do when he came in place of Dana Holgorsen. He was able to keep most of the recruiting class intact, because I think that's going to be a key part of whoever you bring in if you do choose to move on from Neil Brown. Depending on who West Virginia hires as athletic director, is going to be keeping this recruiting class intact.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Drew Ferguson in the comments here says, so what I was saying with Dana Holgorsen comment was that you weren't tremendously awful with Dana Holgorsen. I don't get the point that you fired him and replaced him with Neil Brown. Well, here's the thing in regards to that, is that we didn't fire Dana Holgorsen. What happened was he was, kind of up for an extension. Shane Lyons kind of, went head to head with him. Dana, wanted more money. Shane wasn't willing to give him more money. He was able to get, that more money from Houston. So it was more or less a contract dispute in regards to an extension. And then West Virginia and Dana kind of more or less mutually agreed to part ways, more so than West Virginia firing him. But if you look now 4 years later, who knows if that didn't play a part in Shane Lyons, being forced out at West Virginia as well. Because like me and Steven said earlier, now in hindsight, who knows if Neil Brown was that much of an upgrade over Dana Holgorsen, and maybe that contract dispute played a part in Shane Lyons' future at West Virginia. What do you think, Steven?
Yeah, in hindsight, that very well could have been something that played a factor into it. A lot of people, speculate now on what played into, Rich Rodriguez leaving, and a lot of it was what Eddie Passalong would not agree to with Rich Rodriguez. So,
Absolutely.
and you find out a lot of things, over time about things that happened before.
Yep. I'd 100% agree with you. Krista Siston, appreciate you chiming in here. She asked about Oliver Luck, and then she's not crazy about it because he was responsible for Dana, but he could come in and not miss a beat. Not 100% a positive, but I believe Oliver Luck has come out and said as much as that he's not really interested in personally. Much like I'm not interested in recycling coaches, I don't think recycling athletic directors has a good effect as well. So I'm not too high on Oliver Luck myself as a candidate, and I don't really think West Virginia will go that way. But Stephen, any thoughts on Oliver Luck?
Yeah, this is coming from a person who absolutely loved Oliver Luck as our athletic director in his stint before. I don't think that he would be the right move in what we have going on right now. I think that whenever we did have him before, he was very important in playing the role of setting West Virginia athletics up to where they're at right now. I think if it weren't for Oliver Luck, West Virginia very well have, could have had a chance of not ending up in the Big 12 conference, and a lot of people don't give him credit on that. But overall, I think that with the way that athletics has changed and everything, and with the endeavors that he pursues, I just don't see him being an athletic director, not only for WVU but at any other college. He's more in the commissioner mindset now. I mean, I know he switches roles like he changes underwear, but yeah, I don't think it'd be the right move overall.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree with you on that. Like I said, it's not definitely one of my favorites, and moving forward, I hope it's not one that West Virginia Virginia pursues. But Oliver Luck is definitely a successful guy at many different ventures, like you said. No matter what he does, he's all over the place. But Drew Ferguson coming in here says he has a question: would you take Kansas State's head coach Chris Klieman or no? Yeah, I mean I would, but obviously West Virginia is probably not going to pull him away, and then that goes back to the kind of the hindsight argument, because who Kansas State's two finalists were as far as head coaching wise, Steve. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but their two finalists were Chris Kleiman and Neil Brown. And then you look this year, here we are, 4 years later, they hired, Chris Kleiman the same year that we hired Neil Brown. West Virginia's about, on their way to securing their third losing season in those 4 years, and Kansas State's on their way to a Big 12 championship. So Kansas State certainly made the correct decision. And yeah, Chris Kleiman certainly appears to be a better coach. But any thoughts there, Stephen?
Yeah, I think you could point to a multitude of different situations there. I referenced Luke Fickell earlier. You could talk about Chris Kleiman at Kansas State. You could talk about a bunch of different guys. But I think that overall, I think it's just clear to note that West Virginia made the wrong decision. And, overall, I think that's to combat even what I said earlier. That's probably what made overall the decision for Shane Lyons' departure, because that's really who vouched for Neil Brown the most. I think it was Gordon Gee and Shane Lyons going back and forth through the multitude of the decision making when we was trying to find out. And it was between Luke Fickell and Neil Brown. Gordon Gee obviously wanted Luke Fickell. Shane Lyons wanted Neil Brown, and here we are today. So that's why I say I think we should trust Gordon Gee's opinion a little bit more so this go around, because he's been around. I know everybody thinks he's just this jolly little old man that doesn't really know anything, because he smiles all the time. But I promise you, he's been around some very successful things in his life, at the multitude of places that he's been. And I know that he doesn't have a direct connection to the athletic department, but he's seen some things, and I think that his opinion needs to be respected and trusted. And I think that alone, with what I just said about Luke Fickell and all those other guys, needs to be talked about too, because I think we take for granted that we have Gordon Gee as our president, because he's not only, we have West Virginia has some top level people at our university, but he's one of them.
Yeah, very much so. And I think it goes to, like butterfly effect type deal, right? One decision can change so much, and whether it's, West Virginia going with Neil Brown over Luke Fickell or vice versa, you can go all the way back, and make that argument for so many singular decisions for sure. But I definitely think Gordon Gee is, a little bit underrated. And I think the one thing that I said when West Virginia decided to, part ways from Shane Lyons is shout out to Gordon Gee for, making that move. If Shane Lyons was, really pushing for Neil Brown to get one more year, and this is part of that, maybe trying to move on from that regime, I definitely think Gordon Gee deserves a shout out for that. In my personal, Pat 08 Mullins, appreciate you tuning in and chiming in here. Says, I don't know where the football program goes from here. Are we going to have a major downturn like Virginia Tech or Miami? Thoughts there, Stephen? I'll let you give those real quick. I'll be right back. Just give me 30 seconds here.
Okay, really? I think there's absolutely a chance. I've said it multiple times in the last season and a half that West Virginia's in a very, I keep saying it, and I hate to use it as my favorite word, but a very pivotal time in the program. West Virginia, very, very much so, with this next coaching hire, if that's what's going to happen, has a chance to either boost themselves up, or it's probably going to be like a downturn, like one of those two schools. I very much do believe that. But I do think that that West Virginia has a chance, like I said, with someone like Gordon Gee in place to make some very credible hires and very big time hires. And I think that people can credit Neil Brown all they want for Graham Harrell, but I think that I think other things played a part in Graham Harrell's hiring here. And I've said it a lot before about paying our assistant coaches a respectable a respectable amount, and that's exactly what they did with Graham Harrell, and that was one of the top offensive coordinators in the country. And you could say what you want about our offensive play this year, but you cannot argue that it hasn't improved since the last 3 seasons. It is by far and away improved.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with you there. And I think that it's like I'd agree with you, Stephen, that it's a very pivotal point for West Virginia right now. Moving forward with not only who they announce as the athletic director hire, but what they choose to do with the coaching staff moving forward. And I think the potential is there, to have a downturn. But I also think, if I'm looking on the bright side, and I'm always a glass half full kind of guy, one thing that I've tried to preach, to other Mountaineer fans and everything is the fact that West Virginia has a golden opportunity here. They just have to make the correct decisions in order to take advantage of that golden opportunity. Because you look back, like in the Big East, right? West Virginia, benefited from teams like Miami, Virginia Tech, and the like leaving when they did. West took advantage of that conference and their automatic BCS bid. Went to a couple BCS bowls within 3 years, won both of those, and then even a third. Counting the Orange. In BCS bowls, West Virginia went there as the Big East continued to have that automatic bid. Well, looking forward here in the new Big 12, you've got Texas and Oklahoma on their way out. So you've got a conference that's up for grabs. And I think when you look at West Virginia in comparison to the rest of the teams that will be remaining in the new Big 12, that they are very similar lined up. They're very comparable to the teams that will be remaining in the new 12, whether it's the 4 teams coming in or the 8 teams that are remaining. And West Virginia is maybe perhaps in a similar spot than they were when the Big East went through the transition that it did to possibly take a hold of the conference that they are in, much like they did with the Big East in the latter portion of that conference's days. They could do for the Big 12 as well in the new look conference that is about to be formed here in the Big 12 conference. Because when you look at the Big 12, the conference playoff, the college football playoff rather, is about to expand to 12 teams. The Big 12 is going to be an automatic bid for that 12-team format as the 6 highest conference ranked champions automatically get a bid under the new format, and then of course 6 at-large teams. So if West Virginia wins the Big 12, automatically in the playoff, that's a big boost to your relevancy and what have you. So I think West Virginia is in a position right now that it's kind of a transition period for them at a crossroads, for a lack of a better term, where they can go one way or the other. But I think West Virginia right now could take hold of the new Big 12 if they make the right decisions in order to turn the program for the positive. We've seen programs be turned around in short order, and West Virginia could be one. When you talk about Baylor in a couple years under Dave Aranda, look at Sonny Dykes in year one at TCU this year, Lance Leipold getting Kansas at bowl eligible. You could go on and on down the list. So if West Virginia makes the correct athletic director hire and the correct head coaching hire, they're in a position to be successful moving forward in the New York Big 12, I think. What about you, Stephen?
Yeah, I've said that multiple times. I absolutely agree with that.
Transition period, but who knows, for the future going forward for WVU. But having said that, Stephen, West Virginia falls, unfortunately, to Kansas State, 48-31 in the 11th game of the 2022 WVU football season. Final home game for the Mountaineers. Senior day for a lot of Mountaineers, potentially. I know a lot of players walked. The verdict remains out on how many of those will come back and how many of those will actually move on, including Charles Woods, who's moving on to the transfer portal. And we will have an update out on that shortly here on the West Virginia channel and on the Country Roads webcast channel as well. But having said that, West Virginia, falling to 4-7 overall and 2-6 in the conference in 2022. No bowl game upcoming this season. One more game left on the schedule. Just what are kind of your final thoughts, whether it be in regards to this game or the future of the Mountaineer football program in general, Stephen, before we get ready to close out this post-game show here for West Virginia on the Voice of College Football?
Yeah, I don't really know what the future holds. I just think that we're in a very, like I've said multiple times, I think that we're in a very pivotal point. So within the next few weeks, we're going to find out whether West Virginia's going to be heading in a positive or a negative direction. I think. Well, not in the next few weeks, but in the next few weeks, we're going to make a hire that more or less is going to play a very big role in the future, whether that be positive or a negative.
100%. Couldn't have said it better myself, man. I echo those statements 100%. I think that it's going to be a very interesting next, 2 to 3 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks even, for Mountaineer Nation, whether that be with the athletic director hire or whatever comes after. But having said that, the Mountaineers currently do have one more game remaining in the 2022 season, and that will be the season finale when they go to Stillwater to take on the Oklahoma State Cowboys. And if you want to chime in with us talking about that one, come catch us right back here on the Voice of College Football post game show, West Virginia edition here on the Country Roads webcast channel, the Voice of College Football channel, and the West Virginia channel at the Voice of College Football. And if you haven't already, hit the like button on this video if you're watching us live or if you're tuning in the playback. And if you haven't already, subscribe as we continue to try and get that West Virginia channel up here on the Voice of College Football Network moving forward. But we'll be back one more post-game show here from me and Steven here as members of the Country Roads webcast channel, which if you like Mountaineer sports content, tune into us over at the Country Roads webcast on YouTube as well. But we'll be back next week following the Oklahoma State show for one more West Virginia post-game show on the 2022 season here at the Voice College Football channel. Appreciate you guys for tuning in and chiming in as always, and hope that you come back next week to the same, but as always, I'm Gordon Cruz for Steven, and until next time, as always, let's go Mountaineers.